All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our sensational gardening virtual workshop, the first of its kind in Scottsdale. We are excited that you're here. We're going to have about an hour-long conversation with the expert, Kirti Mathura, who is sitting before you in the screen. She is with the U of A Cooperative Extension, and she is an expert in all things sensational. So we are going to get started. Just a few quick things before we do. There should be a Q&A section on the side of your screen. If there is any technical issues or any questions you have about the presentation itself, please fill that out and we will have people get back to you. There are a few of us that are watching that Q&A. But without further ado, I think we will get started.
Great, thank you, Jill. I'm excited to be able to share some plants with everybody today. The title, Sensational Gardening. Today's focus will be plants that smell good. If a plant is beautiful and smells good, that's, like a double impact in the landscape and definitely a candidate in my thought to use in my garden space. Now, just be aware, scent or fragrance can come from flowers. Some plants have just a magnificent aroma that is emitted from flowers. That is perhaps a limiting factor because it might just be a very short period of the year that particular type of plant is in bloom, and therefore you want to maximize the time, that bloom time, to enjoy the scent. Other plants have oils in their glands, in the leaf tissue, that when they're stimulated, that aroma is emitted and can be enjoyed. So very often for those plants that have the fragrant foliage, they might need a little stimulation. That might require a little bit of gentle caressing on your part, whether you want to gently rub the leaves or brush up against them as you walk by. That will help release those oils from the glands in the plant's tissues. Perhaps for those plants, you can enjoy that fragrance for a longer period of time during the year, or maybe the entire year, depending on whether they're evergreen or might drop some of their leaves during a portion of the year. I have had a hard time selecting which plants we will cover today, but these are some that I think are worth sharing for your desert-adapted, low-water use gardens. We'll start off with some trees and large shrubs. The bee brush here is a wonderful long bloomer, pretty much produces those delicate tiny white flowers born in clusters throughout the warm season, from early spring typically right on through late fall. Now, even though those flowers are tiny, they are quite fragrant. I find that they are, to me, reminiscent of the aroma that you would get from lilacs. Other people say they smell like vanilla. I suspect those people have never smelled fresh lilac blooms before. But we all have different olfactory senses, and lilac is kind of what that fragrance reminds me of. Now, not only do you have that delightful fragrance through several months of the year, this is a plant that will also attract butterflies and hummingbirds with their blooms, and pollinator bees. And once the flowers are pollinated, the tiny dust-like seed that is produced is a great food source for some of our finches, goldfinches, house finches, and so forth. So it's a lovely, pretty large shrub. They can easily get to be about 8 feet tall and wide, sometimes even a little bit larger. So you want to make sure you leave adequate space for them. That's very important when you're planning out your landscape area that with each and every plant, you're allowing it enough space to be able to grow to its mature size without having to control it, because that usually leads to bad pruning practices. The desert willow is one of our native trees that has delightful blooms through the summer months, starting from about mid or late spring right on through till October. It's pretty consistent during October. They're going to taper off with those flowers. Flowers can range from almost a pure white to kind of lavender, rosy purple colors to deep burgundy. There are different selections, so make sure if you are going to purchase one of these from a nursery that you specify exactly which type you're looking for. And within those different ones, they might have variation in mature size, whether they produce seeds or not, and so forth. So do a little homework before you go to your nursery. The desert willow, the flowers have just a lovely light floral scent to them, especially early in the morning. You can enjoy that fragrance when you go out into your yard. Hummingbirds love these flowers, so you've got the visual, the scent, and the delight of having the hummingbirds visit your garden. These are trees that will normally grow multi-trunk from the base. We can prune them up a little bit if you want to be able to walk beneath them once they get matured or have understory plantings. But when we can allow them to have their natural growth, that's going to be healthiest for them, and you can really enjoy that natural character that they bring. The desert willow is winter deciduous. You'll expect it to drop all of its leaves for the winter time, so you get nice shade for cooling during the summer, and then leaves drop and you get more warming sun in for the winter, which is ideal, I think. The Texas mountain laurel comes from the Chihuahuan Desert area, actually. It is wonderful, very well adapted to our conditions here in the valley. The Texas mountain laurel is slow growing. I'd say that's the main drawback to this wonderful plant. But it's a small tree or maybe a really large shrub. They can gradually, slowly grow to about 15 feet in height. Some very, very old, 20, 30-year-old specimens might get a little bit taller than that. But very often they will have a width of about 10 or 12 feet. Their foliage is evergreen. A nice dark green usually. There is an additional type that we have grown from some nurseries that have a more silvery green foliage. Either way, either plant will produce these incredibly fragrant blooms in the spring. Around March, you will have these clusters of purple flowers that smell like grape bubblegum or grape soda, whichever you prefer to liken them to. One problem, it's only a few weeks that we have these delightful blooms around, so enjoy it while you can, inhale deeply as much as you can during those few weeks while they're in bloom. In addition to having the dark green foliage and the silvery foliage options with this Texas mountain laurel, you can also find some that have flowers that are a very, very delicate pale pink or perhaps even white in bloom. So if you like those options for effect in your garden, they will all have that magnificent fragrance that you would have to probably look around a little bit and search for them if you wanted those different colored blooms. As I said, the Texas mountain laurel is a little slow growing, but worth the wait and the patience because of those delightful blooms. Texas ebony is another one from southeast of our desert. We have the just verdant dark green foliage on this tree. It is evergreen. Now this Texas ebony, just a word of caution, it produces very comfortable deep shade, which can be appreciated certainly during the summer months, but it's such dense shade that it is virtually impossible to grow any other types of healthy plants below its foliage. So just be aware of that, and don't try to plant a bunch of things that you want to flourish that will be in the shade of this tree. They're gonna languish. The flowers will first appear late spring. You will have these elongated clusters of cream colored flowers that are super sweet smelling, just really impactful. That scent can very easily travel through the air for a nice distance. The flowers will also appear in cycles during the summer months when we get some rain. You could potentially have, a few or several potentially cycles of the bloom with this tree during the warm season. Once flowers are pollinated, you get these awesome, thick, robust seed pods that can be really fun that develop, and the pods might even split and drop their seeds to the ground and remain attached to the tree for a while, several months even. But I think they're very ornamental. This tree does have thorns, but it is just a really wonderful tree if you're wanting that deep shade and the deep green color. It really contrasts. If you look very carefully behind this Texas ebony, there is a Palo Verde. It's a wonderful contrast with that lighter green of the Palo Verde or the silvery greens of the brittle bush that you see in the foreground. Texas ebony, it's one of those kind of moderate-sized trees. They usually don't get more than about 20 or at most I'd say 25 feet in height. Desert lavender. All of the lavenders actually originate in Europe or the Mediterranean region. So it's not actually a lavender, but the chemistry of the oil in their glands is very similar to that of lavender. So we get that common name of desert lavender. This is a variable large shrub. It can mature with a size of anywhere from about 5 or 6 feet in height to 8 or 10 feet in height. Sometimes they develop a little bit wider branching pattern. Others, they are very upright in their growth habits, such as the one on the left. So there can be variability. You could manipulate that a little bit with some very judicious selective pruning, but just be aware, don't expect any particular form or growth habit from your desert lavender because, like people, they vary. That foliage is silvery in color because of the fine hair-like structure on the leaf surface. The flowers are tiny, purplish in color. They're borne in clusters at the node points where the leaves attach to the stem. Will have a fantastic bloom in the spring, and then intermittently through the warm season, or almost any time of the year when we get a little bit more rain, you'll have another flush of these tiny flowers that attract butterflies and hummingbirds. The foliage is the fragrant part. If you gently caress those leaves of the desert lavender and inhale, you will have a nice fragrance that's similar to that of the lavender plants. So definitely you want to have your desert lavender growing in full sun or as much sun as possible to have good development of the foliage and good flowering.
Kirti, we have a question from Doug, kind of along that same vein. How does this do in full sun about 8 hours in the summer? Is that
it can be in direct sun all day during the summer. It's a native plant. Normally you would see it growing lower slopes or even along washes in the desert here. So they're tough. They can take the full sun, definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Doug, for questioning that. Another native that is almost indestructible, it's so tough but so beautiful, is the creosote. This shrub can gradually grow to about 6 or 8 feet in height. and spread. Even sometimes I've seen these get to be about 10 feet tall. If they're grown with very infrequent watering after you get them established, they will have a very open, airy growth habit, and the branches will even tend to have some almost kind of sensuous curvature to them. If you do water a little more frequently, not overwatering, but water a little bit more regularly, you will be promoting faster growth, and those stems will all be straight because of that fast growth development. But either way, the creosote is wonderful. It's just got a nice form to it that you really don't have to do any pruning. The flowers appear in the spring. They are a beautiful golden color. After pollination, you get these little seed structures that are all fluffy. I grew up in the Midwest, and those kind of remind me of pussy willows. They're kind of interesting, and they just sparkle and glisten when they're backlit by the sun. With the creosote, you have resinous leaves, and especially new growth, if you squeeze some of those very young, tender leaves together, they almost stick together because of resins. But those resins are what gives us such a unique aroma. And if you've ever smelled these after a rain, you'll know what I'm talking about. They will just fill the air with this kind of indescribable fragrance after a rain. And some people think, well, we don't get rain that often, I won't be able to enjoy that very often. Well, I have found that if you just gather up some of the branches and breathe on the foliage like you're breathing on glass or a mirror to fog it, that's enough moisture to be able to enjoy that fabulous fragrance from your creosote. So definitely full sun and well-drained soil would be best for your creosote. Now we're going to Australia with our feathery senna. Some people, if you've been around the valley as long as I have, you might know these as cassias. Just some taxonomical, botanical name changes over time, but it is a good idea, I would suggest, if you're shopping for your plants, have that botanical name jotted down. Those botanical names are universal and can oftentimes help you avoid any confusion when you're shopping for your plants. Sometimes very different plants might have the same common name, and you want to make sure you get home to your garden with the right plant. So these sennas from Australia are tough as nails. They just flourish in direct sun all day, even in the hottest times of the summer, and generally they are very, very cold hardy. They are just wonderful. But just remember, they get large. Pretty much all of the sennas are going to get around 6 to 8 feet in height and spread. So when we put them someplace where you want a 3x3 shrub and abuse them, such as that left example, by consistently every few weeks shearing off all of that new growth, you're going to miss out on the blooms. These photos were taken actually the very same day. One was in my neighbor's yard, the one that sheared, hardly any flowers, and the other one was around the corner in a vacant lot. No irrigation, nobody offering any maintenance. And yet this one, it was flourishing. It was full of bloom that was very, very sweet smelling. So just keep that in mind when we're working with our shrubs. For the main thing, I think the main concern, that constant shearing is an unhealthy practice for the plants. We keep removing their ability to make their food to flourish. But the other thing is, a lot of times we're shearing off the beauty of the blooms and potentially the fragrance of those flowers as well. So, and I forgot to mention, our sennas, most of them are spring blooming. We do have some native sennas that have perhaps a little bit different bloom cycle, but these Australians, most of them are kind of late winter or spring bloomers. The sweet acacia, very appropriately named, has golden puffball clusters of flowers around mid or late winter on into the spring, and these are heavily, heavily scented. In fact, they are even used in perfumery in Europe. But that sweet scent, it will travel through the air very easily, and you'll usually get a couple of months of being able to enjoy those fabulous flowers. The cascalote has a bloom cycle during the cool season. It can start as early as October. If we don't have very cold temperatures, they could still be blooming in March in the spring. So you could have potentially several months of these delightful blooms. The flowers have a very kind of light floral citrusy scent is the way I would describe it. The flowers will just stop their business if we do have a cold snap. And they generally won't recur, jump back into a bloom cycle. Those flower buds are very cold tender. I love this tree also because of the gnarly thorns that it has. These thorns, they're kind of hooked, almost cat claw like. Especially when they're young, they can just shred you, but they persist, and as any of the branches start growing in girth, those thorns will also get thicker. And I think they're just fabulous ornamental components of this tree. I think very, very attractive when we get a trunk that has these real thick thorns remaining attached to them. You can always pay somebody else to get ripped and shredded by pruning them. Don't let that scare you off. But you've got this nice evergreen tree, fairly dark green foliage. So again, it's a nice contrast to some of our other desert plants that have that silvery or lighter green aspect to them. Vitex tree. This is another plant that comes from the Mediterranean region. We can somewhat control the size of, especially of our trees, with watering practices. You never want to overwater, but sometimes if you manipulate your watering schedule to be very, very frugal or a little bit more generous, you'll get different results. Definitely with this monk's pepper tree, once it gets established, if you're watering, every few weeks, you can have a plant, maybe that might develop to about 8, 10, or 12 feet in height and spread. If it's getting watered about every 2 weeks, especially there are areas in the valley that historically have had flood irrigation, you will get big trees that might even get to be 30 foot tall and wide, and they'll develop huge, very, I think, very interesting big trunks. So watering practices will result in different mature sizes of this plant. It is winter deciduous, so your leaves will drop during the winter time, but in spring, flower buds burst out with the new foliage, and you have flowers that are fairly fragrant. They will attract definitely butterflies and even hummingbirds, but the foliage is very, very aromatic. If you just gently rub the leaves, you'll get kind of almost kind of like a woodsy, sweet scent coming from them. The Vitex blooms in this kind of a lavender purplish color to pink to even white blooming forms. You really won't know until they bloom, so unless the nursery has marked it as the color that it will bloom, it will be a surprise for you when it starts that bloom cycle. These are delightful. They will bloom prolifically in the spring, and we'll usually have some lighter bloom during the summer with some good rains. One of the common names, monk's pepper tree, I've got some of the seed showing there. They're about the size of peppercorns and historically were used as a condiment. Now we're getting a little bit lower in scale with some of our shrubs. Our woolly butterfly bush from the Chihuahuan Desert is super duper drought tolerant. You have to have well-draining soil for this Larrea. This is so much better to grow around here than the, some people might be familiar with the Larrea davidii. Those just need way too much water. They're not happy with our extreme temperatures, you know, and so forth. So this one is great. Those flowers have a sweet, sweet, sweet scent. It won't travel much through the air, so you do need to get up close and personal and put your nose close before inhaling, and you can enjoy that sweetness that they offer. The butterflies are just as attracted to these as those other kind of more flamboyant butterfly bushes, but this one has that silvery foliage, is just stunning, I think. And then all through the warm season, they will produce those little globes of clusters of orange, tiny little flowers. Here we have the turpentine bush. Now, I wish I had been able to name this plant. I wouldn't have called it turpentine. Again, everybody's noses perceive chemistry differently. I think this is very clean and fresh smelling if you caress the leaves on this plant. Somebody who gave it that name caressed and smelled turpentines. I think it's delightful smelling. This is a fall bloomer. We have to grow this in full sun. In the fall, it will be covered with these brilliant golden flowers that are wonderful for attracting numerous types of butterflies, not just the queen butterflies that we see here, but they offer a lot of nectar for a wide range of butterflies. So they've got to be in full sun. Nice slow growing, only gets to be about 2 to 3 feet in height. So we can tuck them in here and there, but they do have to have that good sun exposure. One of the leucophyllums from the Chihuahuan Desert, this is among my favorites because it smells so good. The foliage on these might offer a little fragrance, but this one has very sweet smelling flowers. Most of these, some people call them sages or barometer bushes or Texas Rangers. Some of them don't, the flowers don't offer much scent at all. This Leucophyllum levigatum, as well as Leucophyllum pruinosum, are very, very sweet smelling. So these we find blooming just like crazy during the monsoon season. We get a little bit of rain and they will flush with total bloom covering the plants. Very, very delightful. This is another one that prefers full sun exposure, all day sun, and well-draining soil. Some people get confused and think this is one of our native jojoba shrubs, but it's not. You won't get much scent off of a jojoba, but when you plant one of these mango dulces, which is evergreen and looks very much like the jojoba, you will have wonderful fragrance from these teensy little teeny tiny flowers that are born in clusters at the base of those leaves. They're very inconspicuous. They kind of blend in with their greenish color. You'll have a spring bloom and perhaps another couple of blooms during the monsoon season with these mango dulce. And even though those flowers are so tiny, you really don't notice them, but you will notice the wonderful fragrance that they offer. So this is another one. Full sun is great too, just light shade for the mango dulce. And rosemary. I don't think I need to say much about this one, but caress, and it's supposed to help with your memory. I think I need to caress and sniff more of this. Just remember, some rosemaries are low growing, more of a ground cover. Others could get 4 to 5 or 6 foot tall and wide. Make sure, because there is such a wide range of rosemaries available, make sure you're getting the correct type for the location in your garden. And they want full sun, definitely. Very, very drought tolerant. This chaparral sage comes from Southern California. It is incredible. So I think it's one of those that some people say you either, just are in love, enamored with the fragrance, or you detest it because the scent that is emitted from the foliage of this especially is so intense. So I think it, evokes, very strong likes or dislikes with this plant. It can get to be about 4 to 6 foot tall and wide. The leaves are lightly kind of pubescent, fuzzy, and if you just gently caress these, that fragrance just explodes. At the peak of summer, when we're 105, 110 degrees, the stimulation, physical stimulation of the foliage isn't really even necessary. Those oils will volatilize because of the heat of the day, and you can enjoy that fragrance. These are wonderful. I always just want to kind of like roll around in one of these when I'm nearby so that I can walk away smelling that for a good long while. They are spring bloomers. Around March, they will begin to bloom with these whorls of lovely lavender flowers that attract butterflies and hummingbirds. And they'll continue through April, perhaps even through May. When we really start to get into the summer, these plants will start to slow down, to shut down. In their native habitat, they don't get really much rain at all during the summer. This plant has a strategy of it just kind of goes on vacation. It may look even half dead. So allow it to go through that natural cycle. It may look like the most pathetic thing in your yard, but it's important to not overwater it. You have to have wonderfully draining soil to start with, but once we get into the summer, do not increase water, feeling like you need to help the plant. Maintain your watering schedule up to that point, or even cut back to a less frequent watering until around September, when this plant will then start to come back to life and utilize that water. Otherwise, if you water too much, or if your soil doesn't drain well, during the monsoon season, this plant will have difficulty. Part of the plant or the entire plant could rot because of fungal effects on their vascular system. So resist that temptation to kill it with kindness. These are just wonderful shrubs to have in your garden because of that incredible scent. Very sweet, sagey smell. From the Mediterranean, we have low-growing Santalinas. This is a gray form, a species that has this delightful silvery gray-green foliage. You can run your hands over the top of the plant and enjoy a very woodsy, earthy fragrance. They will produce these golden flowers, kind of button-like. In the spring, they rise up each one on an individual stem a few inches above the foliage. There is a green, dark green foliage species as well that has similar cream colored flowers. Both of these are very, very aromatic and very drought tolerant and sun loving. Perfect for our gardens here in the valley. Oh, chocolate flower. This is a long blooming from spring right on through late fall. The flowers will be open, emitting their strong, sweet chocolate-like scent in the morning. The flowers will close up by mid-afternoon. That heat of the day kind of triggers that closing of the flowers. I just love to go out into the garden in the morning with my coffee and pretend that I'm having chocolate with my coffee. Luckily for the plant, the flowers don't taste like chocolate, but they sure emit a fragrance that smells like it. As I say, they're long blooming all through the warm season. You'll have some butterflies visiting those flowers, and they're just delightful. Very drought tolerant, full sun to the lightest bit of shade. would be preferred by your chocolate flower. Damianita. This plant has deep, deep, deep green leaves that are needle-like almost. They're very narrow and super aromatic. Just very, very clean, almost citrusy, piney smelling. In the spring and in the fall, you will have this plant covered with bright golden yellow flowers. So you've got that fabulous color. You almost need sunglasses when these are covered with their bright blooms. It's so, so bright. But in between those bloom cycles, you can really enjoy that fragrance caressing the foliage. Full sun to very, very light shade for the Damianita. They just stay pretty low, a foot to maybe up to 2 feet in height. Nice little compact forms. Sacred Datura. Now, you do not want to plant one of these where either children or pets that can't resist putting everything into their mouths that they come across. You don't want to plant one of these, but otherwise, this is a great one. I say that because all parts of this plant are toxic. The plant it's a perennial, so it lives for several years. It grows from an underground tuberous root system. So in the spring, you'll get this flourish of growth, and a plant can get even like 6 feet wide and maybe 3 or 4 foot tall, sometimes even a little bit larger than that. And during the summer months, you will have these flowers that are exquisite, big white trumpet shaped in form. They will open in the evening and be open through the night. So these attract night pollinators. Some of our white-lined sphinx moths that are so hummingbird-like in their movement and size. And they will also share a wonderful light, sweet scent that you can enjoy. During the summer, on a good night, you might have a couple dozen blooms. Otherwise, you might just have a few here and a few there. They're long blooming through the summer months. So in the morning when the sun comes up, those individual flowers will wither. Each flower is only open for one night. They are spectacular for a night garden. Oh, our native verbena. This is the best verbena of all. They don't mind all-day sun. They're drought tolerant. They're just nice, tough plants that are very, very pretty looking and wonderful smelling. These, this, I think, is what the petunias copied when they decided to come up with their scent. Very sweet smelling, and I do think that it's very similar to the scent, that fragrance that's so wonderful with your petunia blooms. Fabulous spring bloomer. You'll usually get another nice little bloom in the fall. As I say, they're drought tolerant. They love the sun. Most of the other verbenas that we have available for our landscapes, they're not native, and they will prefer some shade in the summer, more water. They're pretty needy. This one, not so. They will attract butterflies to your garden. Just delightful plants to have. Now, these are the lavenders that are actually lavender. From the Mediterranean, there are so many different lavenders and what we call lavandins that you could use in your garden here. Most of them are just sun worshipers. They demand a well-draining soil, like that chaparral sage during the monsoon season. If they don't have adequate drainage or they get too much water, they will just say goodbye. So be careful, be cautious about the drainage of the soil. The flowers will attract, they're very small, but they will attract butterflies, hummingbirds, pollinator bees. They are great. Now, each of these types of lavender, Spanish lavender, English lavender, whatever kind of sweet lavenders, French They all have slightly different bloom periods. So you can pick and choose to have a range. And the one that's the lower pictures here, that is a fernleaf lavender. That is typically the longest blooming. They'll start blooming in the fall. If we don't have cold weather during the winter, they can be blooming from around October till April or May. If we get down to those, mid-20s, they're going to suffer some damage. None of the other lavenders even bat an eye at any of the cold temperatures that we face here in the valley. So this one, it smells kind of weird. Not what you would think of when, lavender, when you associate that name. So it smells kind of weird, tastes kind of weird, but it is great for all of our pollinators because of that extended bloom time. So they love full sun. We have to give all of these lavenders really good draining soil. So here we have the French lavender, sweet lavender. They will vary in size. So if you're interested in lavenders, do a little homework to make sure that it will fit in the space you have to offer. Our native Blackfoot daisy. The flowers are just delightful on this plant, and they have a wonderful sweet scent. The Blackfoot daisy blooms almost year-round. I'd say maybe the most, it takes a little break in the middle of winter, but for the most part, you're going to have months and months and months of wonderful bloom to enjoy, and also that will be providing for butterflies in your garden. It's nice, low-growing. The Blackfoot daisy is another plant that you really have to ensure that soil drains well where you're planting them. Full sun is the best for your Blackfoot daisy. Now here's an interesting plant, and it has relatives that are interesting and fun, I think. The Lanfredas have foliage that has colored splotches, kind of purplish or maroon colored splotches on the green of the leaves, which I think is cool. Very unusual. So there are different species that get to be different size within the Lanfredas, but this is one of the smaller ones. The plant itself usually won't even get to be a foot in height, might spread a little over a foot. And these are better with a little bit of midday to afternoon shade in the valley here. A little bit of relief from that summer sun. The flowers on this one, the flower stem will get to be perhaps about 3 foot tall. The flowers will be open for a few days. So starting with the lower buds that open, you'll have those flowers open in the evening usually, and they do have a nice sweet scent to them. They're wonderful for hummingbirds, just something interesting to have in your garden. So they have kind of a tuberous, bulbous root system to them. An evening primrose native to our region. The white tufted evening primrose has interesting leaves. They have little glands on the hairs of the leaves that might get kind of sticky. If we have one of those years where there are a lot of white flies and you're in one of those areas where they're abundant, you might find them kind of stuck to the leaves, but they're interesting leaves. The overall plant, it just is this nice roundish mound. Peak bloom is in the spring with these delightful flowers opening in the evening primrose, get it? The flowers will open in the evening. They're only open for one night, and the next morning when the sun hits them, they'll wither. Some of the individuals might have the kind of added bonus that those white flowers wither to a lovely pink color. Others, they just wither to kind of a cream color. This is, as a night bloomer, it's another one that will cater to our native hawk moths. Just a nice, light, sweet scent is emitted from the flowers. We usually have another bloom kind of late summer into the fall if we have some good monsoon rains. The evening primrose can grow in full sun to light shade. The flowers that we have here, I think, are the largest of the penstemons that we can grow here in the low desert. They are sweet, sweet, sweet smelling. They will fill the air, especially at nighttime or into the early morning. You can really enjoy that fragrance. A delicate pink, and it looks like a little bit of rosy purple paint kind of spilled out of the floral tube there. Just a nice mound. They are spring bloomers. I would offer this one a little shade during the summer months as well. Russian sage is a great one. It likes quite a bit of sun, and it has very, very aromatic foliage. This one, if we get cold enough during the winter, it might die back, drop a lot of its foliage and die back a little bit. So it's one that will resprout with new stems, new growth in the spring. Very tiny purplish flowers in clusters, usually in the summer on into the fall, will be attractive to butterflies, maybe even some hummingbirds. Melt lemon marigold. This has very, very, very super duper aromatic foliage. Just the lightest of cress will release what I think is a very fresh scent. And for some people who don't like it, it's overwhelming. But I just love this. The bloom on the Mount Lemon Marigold is a little bit erratic. It doesn't seem to have very set bloom schedule like some plants do. So you might get it blooming in the fall, might be winter into spring. But when they do bloom, they're almost daisy-like flowers. And though this is a marigold, quite large, very attractive. You'll get visitation by butterflies to go with that dramatic aromatic foliage. Now this is a little dynamite. Some people call it Mexican tarragon. I prefer Mexican marigold. It has a delightful licorice-like or anise-like scent to the foliage and the flowers. It is a fall bloomer. Usually October into November, you have these brilliant golden, really small marigold flowers at the stem tips. Once that flowering season is over, around December, the plant will start to die back to the ground. Mid to late March, they will send up all new stems and foliage for the new season. So they're just wonderful small plants. They get to be maybe about 2 foot tall and are great to tuck in here and there. They can take full sun or light shade in your garden. This is a ground cover that smells lemony, citrusy. You rub your hand over the top of this plant and that will, cause the release of those oils from the leaf tissues, and you can enjoy that fragrance. For us, these are mainly fall and spring bloomers. You won't get much bloom during the summer. It's just kind of a medium yellow, not a brilliant yellow like that brilliant yellow in this garden shot here. That would be your Damianita, so you can see the difference in the brightness of the yellows there. This is a great ground cover that can spread, an individual plant might spread 3 to 5 feet. They really do like quite a bit of sun. If you've got them in too much shade, they will languish and just say goodbye. Ooh, pretty germander. This has a fragrance that is somewhat like juicy fruit gum. Very sweet smelling, sweet and fruity. The foliage is kind of silvery with that pubescence, the fine hairs on the leaves. These plants will get to be at most usually a foot tall and can spread 3 to 4 or 5 feet in width. Spring, usually well into the summer, you have these lovely rosy purple flowers that will attract many different butterflies, and they're just a delight to have in the garden. So a few succulent type plants or cactus and some accent pieces to include in your garden potentially. Schatz agave is almost grassy like. It has very narrow leaves, it's low growing. So in the upper right photo, it's that clump that looks grass-like. Now, it's a good thing that the bloom stem on this doesn't get more than about 8 to 10 feet in length. When they are in full bloom, the slender stem doesn't very well support all that weight, so it tends to kind of curve over, which is a good thing because this is an agave that has very, very sweet smelling flowers. And by them being shorter and the stem curving over, we really get an opportunity to enjoy that fragrance. So with all of our agaves that we have in our landscapes around here, once that individual plant blooms, then it's going to die. But generally these will form some nice clumps and the remaining plants will carry on to give us bloom in future years. Now this is a cactus that's great for a lightly to moderately shaded area. A lot of our cactus, we need to put them in the sun, but these little echinopsis, or some people consider these trichocereus hybrids, they're from South America, and they do not care for direct sun. You know, that under a Palo Verde or maybe even a mesquite is ideal. Once we get into spring, you can start having blooms. They're that elongated trumpet-shaped form. Some of them are very, very sweet smelling, but some don't have any fragrance, so it varies. They also vary in the color of the flower. So if you're wanting, you know, to have the lovely flowers plus fragrance, make sure you ask about them at the nursery to make sure you get both of those features. Some of them will form nice little groups, kind of big clusters over the years. But you can have successive blooms during the summer when we get a little bit of rain. So very nice for a shaded garden. Now, the night flowering Hesperallo produces sweet scented flowers also. And this species has narrower leaves than are very common, what we call red yucca that we see so often around town, around the valley. So this one's a little bit more grassy-like, and the flowers, they're not brilliant colored, but that cream color or white offers a really nice scent when they bloom. This is a columnar cactus that if you've got, you know, a 6 or 8 foot wide space that you could fit one of these in, oh my gosh, these are great. The flowers, I think, are jasmine-like in their fragrance. They will start blooming in spring. You can have several bloom cycles on your whortleberry or garambullo during the warm season. And not only do they get that incredible fragrance that greets you in the morning and just easily travels through the air, once these flowers are pollinated, you get delicious little berry-like fruit. More diminutive is our Arizona Queen of the Night. Most of the year it looks like a dead stick. It will, however, grace you with the most exquisite blooms during the summer. The flowers have just an enchanting sweet scent to them. Each flower only opens for one night, so it's a very special occasion. And even though this plant looks like a dead stick above ground, below ground it has this incredible tuberous root that enlarges with the age of the plant. So that's its reserve. If your flowers get pollinated, you get these wonderful fruits that most often you won't get to taste because the birds will get to them first. But this is just a charming plant to have. It's kind of like a little hidden jewel that you get to enjoy during the summer when it blooms at night. Now, here's another one. Oh, good grief, mother-in-law's tongue. These are awesome plants. A lot of us have them as house plants, but when we put them out in a shaded location, key thing, shaded location, they do not like direct sun. And well-drained soil that doesn't stay too wet during the winter to cause rot, these are fabulous. They will have slightly different blooms depending on the species. Some of them are very low growing, others have, might have wide leaves or thin leaves. And one of my favorites has these cylindrical leaves, and it's very, the leaves are very elongated. So there's a wide range of species and even a lot of hybrids these days, all with a slightly different bloom. Generally, they're very sweet scented. Some of them might be kind of gardenia or jasmine-like. Others smell like sweet coconut when they bloom. But you have to have a nice shaded location for these sansevierias. They're just so fun to play around with and have different types in your shaded garden. For a hanging planter, this sarcostemma, I guess you could call this rope plant. I didn't have a common name there. But this has clusters of tiny little flowers. They're almost like milkweed flowers. They are super sweet smelling. So that cluster is maybe the size of a quarter. Very small flowers, but they do pack a lot of fragrance. Now, for those of you who are tricksters, you could plant some of these stapelias. They do vary in aroma between different species, but they have the coolest flowers. Some of them look like these big starfish, such as with this example. Some of them have a unique aroma because they are generally pollinated by flies. So they might smell like rotting flesh. So as I say, trickster, if you're like I am, somebody admires your flower and you're, oh yeah, take a whiff. And they'll get their nose up there and inhale and, ooh, stinky. Plus I think they have really cool flower buds. So that was a whirlwind view of just a few plants that could offer that fragrant note to your garden. So I encourage you to breathe deeply, caress when needed, and delight in the fragrance of some of these plants in your garden. So we thank you for joining us, and I wonder if we have some questions, Jill?
We have had a few. Some of them we were able to answer, so we've just published them for anyone who's curious.
Oh, great.
But we are open to any additional questions that you may have. I'm also going to post up our email address. So if you are watching this either after the fact or rewatching or thinking about this later and have a question and, oh, I really wanted to know the answer and now Kirti is doing something else, you can email that to us as well. But if anybody has any final questions, please let us know. Please submit those via the Q&A, and we are happy to take those right now as well.
And you do have a wonderful resources from our municipalities, a wonderful booklet that is available online. Especially it's great because if you go to the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association website, amwua.org, you can access this plant booklet, and you'll have more photos, more examples listed online than you would in the hard copy. But you also have the benefit of search features to explore these plants. So many of them that I covered today, you can get more information that would include, you know, sun exposure, mature height, and other features of the plants. They're at your fingertips on your computer. So, did we forget anything?
We have a few questions that have come in. Gail asks, where is the best place to purchase these desert shrubs?
Well, Gail, for the things that are a little less common, you want to mark your calendar to hit the plant sales at the botanical institutions. Desert Botanical Garden, Boyce-Thompson Arboretum, some of our institutions down in Tucson, such as Arizona Sonoran Desert Museum, Tucson Botanical Garden, Tohono Chul, are great at offering some rather unique plants, and some of them, they are just plants that they themselves grow. Otherwise, I recommend that you look for local nurseries. Big box stores, they do get some plant material from some of our local growers, but a lot of it is coming from areas outside of our desert environment, and they might not be the best suited for our conditions here. They might be higher water users. I think a lot of our local nurseries really work at carrying plants that are best for us to use in our gardens. So I live south in Chandler, so I'm not super familiar with a lot of the nurseries that you have throughout the Scottsdale area, but I would look for those that are more local. I think they cater more to our garden needs.
We have one additional question from Tim, and that is, have you written a book?
I can't remember back that far. Yes, I have. The Arizona Low Desert Flower Garden.
Right. Well, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate you being here. This presentation will be available on our workshops page. There'll be a button under each class, including this one, after they have been shown and run live. And so you are welcome to view them when you are able. And we hope that you will join us for more of our workshops. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.